So this video, we will be starting a new series. This will be the beginner's guide to Gosu in Ruby. So if you want to know about the Gosu 2D game library or the Ruby language a little bit more, I guess, this will be the one. So to get started, we're going to clone the GitHub repository for this, and it's going to be github.com Programming Rainbow Beginner's Guide to Gosu in Ruby. So I'm just going to copy this URL, and then I'm going to use git clone and Beginner's Guide to Gosu in Ruby. Okay, so I'm going to go inside of this directory and open it. If you're using VS Code, you can do the same thing, or you can actually open VS Code and then tell it to open the directory or folder. Either way will work. Okay, so let's look at what we have here. We have some assets here. The fonts, the images, the music, the sounds are assets that we'll be working with in this series. All the source code for all the videos is already available, so you can see the different versions of the code for video 1, video 2, 3, 4, 5. And the main.rb is actually the current source from video 5. So if we looked inside here, that's going to be identical. And we will be just working with the main.rb file. That will be our source file that we're working with, this one right here. Now I don't think I'm running an LSP at all for this, but I am running, I do have tree sitter so I have syntax highlighting, but since Ruby's a very simple language, I'm not running an LSP. There's no language server, I don't think, happening. I have nothing set here. It was not a problem for me. But one thing I do find a little bit annoying is that it tries to set the shift width to 2 spaces instead of 4. So I'm going to be changing that. It drives me crazy, so I need it to be 4 for me. The spacing is already set to 4, but it's showing these lines at 2. And if I were to make a tab right now, it would be at 2, not 4. So I'm immediately going to change that. I don't know how that's done in VS Code, but we're just going to set it here. So I'm going to do that, and that's going to set it the way I like it. Okay, so let's talk about Ruby. This isn't a Ruby guide. This is more on Gosu, not Ruby. But we can talk a little bit about Ruby. So the Ruby is a general purpose programming language. It's an interpreted scripting language. It's not compiled. It is also very much object orientated. It's class. Everything is an object. Everything's a class in Ruby. So if you really want to get to know object orientated programming, use it. This is a very nice language for that. This is a very easy language to work with. It's very enjoyable to program in. I think it has one of the highest satisfactory ratings of any language. So this is a really great starter language, or just if you're building projects. The downside to Ruby is it is a slower language because it's interpreted, and even with the other interpreted languages like Python, JavaScript, Lua, Ruby is still slower. So if performance is what you're after, Ruby is not the one. But if you're just learning to program, or if you don't need cutting edge performance, you just need your program to work, Ruby is a really nice language to work with. So, and I think this is maybe my second for beginners to start with. I think Lua is the #1 language for beginners to learn from, but Ruby is a close second. But Ruby is a little bit more complicated because you do need to know classes right away because it is all class-based. But beside that, it's actually really easy to work with, really easy to learn and get the concepts pretty quickly. So this is a very nice language to start with. And the Gosu is pretty nice. It's not perfect. It has a couple little quirks missing. It's got one missing thing that every other 2D game library has, and it doesn't seem to have. We'll talk about that later, but for the most part, it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. I like this one. and the language is really nice. I really like working with the language. It only took me like maybe a day to learn and to get comfortable with when I was just getting started learning programming, and this was very quick to learn this one, and it was a much better time than learning Python with Pygame and Pygame Zero and everything else like this. This one, Gosu, is just, it just works. It's really nice. So let's look at what we have here. We have the Gosu library. Now there is two different versions. There's Ruby and C++, and we are going to be working with the Ruby version. So this website has multiple different resources to work with. So I just want to show real quick. So you have the website, and you can click on the Ruby here, and it's got some examples which are really nice. And it has, if we go over here, we have this Ruby reference. We also have a wiki on GitHub for I think it's just general purpose, but it might be Ruby. And there is also getting started with Ruby tutorials, and this is also on GitHub, I believe. I'll show you the links to them here. So this is the wiki on GitHub, the one link over here, wiki on GitHub. And this is going to show you how to install it and everything else. It has some pretty good information. And then sorry, I've missed it. So if we go over here and we open up the tutorial one, this is also on GitHub. It's just a sub page of that one. And this one is really nice because it shows you little snippets of code and explains them. And this is really good because if you're new in a language, the reference, I'll show you the reference real quick. This is the reference. And if you don't know the language very well, you're just kind of getting started in Ruby and you don't really know this library, how to use it. When you look at something like this, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. After you know how to use it, it does. It's references for people who already know how to do things. So if I go down to window here, and it's a pound sign, it's a hash, borderless, and then this double colon. This is not even the syntax of the Ruby language. So when I look at this means nothing to me whatsoever. But when I hover over it, it is telling me, oh, it's an instant method. Now I'm starting to understand what it's talking about. But in the very beginning, if I just came in and looked at this and I was just new to Ruby or something, this makes no sense to me. But it will, by the time we're done with these videos, all this stuff should make sense. But the one thing you have to understand is that reference documentation is for people who already know how to do the thing, not for the person starting out. So the nice thing here with the not this one, not the Winky one, but the other one, this one here, the tutorial one. The nice thing about this is it shows you snippets of code and then it explains them. So now you can say, oh, now I start to understand. And now when I see the same thing in the actual reference, it makes sense to me what they're talking about and what it does. So that's the nice thing about this. There's quite a good amount of documentation, and the tutorial one is really easy to read and understand. So that is a big plus. The reference it's good, but you won't, like it. You have to wrap your head around it a little bit first. Okay. And it's immediately, we're going to be dealing with classes because everything's classes. So let's just get started with it. And the first thing is we need to use this Gosu window. This is our base class, and we're going to make a subclass or a derived class from it. Oh, that will be our game. So in Ruby, everything is a class. Like everything, even a number, like number 5, that's an instance, it's a class object. So let's get started here. So I'm just going to show you the project real quick that this is going to build before we start tearing it down and starting from zero. So it's going to play music, and I'm going to pause the music right away so I can talk over it and stuff. The way that we run let me before I even run it, the way that we would install, let's see here. The way that we would install Ruby, if you're on Linux system, it's going to be something like sudo pacman, and then it'll be like Ruby. Be something like this. It's already installed for me. But Gosu, and it is mentioned lots of times in their thing, but it's Ruby uses gems to install. I believe it's mentioned all over the place. Gem install Gosu. So if you've ever used Python, you might see pip, things like that. Well, for Ruby, it's gem. So Ruby is a type of gem. So if you want to install packages for Ruby, you use gem, and it comes with the Ruby package. So it's gem install Gosu, and I've already done that as well. But it would be gem install Gosu. I don't need to run this because I already have it on my system. But for anybody that doesn't, that's what you would do. So all of that in place, assuming now we have Ruby on our system and now we have Gosu on our system, the way we run one of these Ruby games is this terminal I have open is in this directory. So I'm going to run Ruby, and then the name of the file, the Ruby file, is main.rb. So that main.rb. And again, I'm going to pause the music right away. Okay, so this is what we're going for. We have the Gosu text moving around the screen. We can press space and change the background color. We can move the Ruby around. Okay. This is kind of the standard thing that I've done with all the different beginners guides. Just showing you how to do text, how to load images, how to move them around, how to shut down, how to mute, play music, play sounds, all that stuff. So that's going to be what we're going to end up with. So let's start from 0 now. I'm just going to delete that main.rb file that we just saw, so we can just start from the beginning. And I'm just going to create a new one. And you can do that any way that you want. It's just a blank text file, so I'm just going to use touch. And we see it get created over here. You could have made it any way you want as long as it's over here. Okay, and let's look at some of our documentation. So since I'm going to show it to you both ways right here. So we have this Ruby tutorial, and if we read it, it says every Gosu application starts with a subclass of Gosu window. A minimal window looks like this. Okay, so what it is this Gosu is our base class. This Gosu window is the base class. So Gosu is our package. The double colon is a scope. It's talking about it's in the scope. It's in the Gosu subscope. I can't think of the correct word for it, but so this window class belongs in the Gosu package, and it's a base class that we're deriving all of its qualities from. So we're going to make our own class, but it's going to have all the qualities of this window class. So we have this window class. The way that we do that is by making our own class. So they're using tutorial. We're not going to do that. We'll name it something else. But they're deriving everything from this base class. So this is with this left arrow. Then they're defining their initializer for the class. This is the constructor. Okay. And this first thing here, this super, this is saying we're constructing our subclass, but we actually want to send some information up to the base class's constructor, not our constructor. So this super 640 by 480, it's saying that these two items are going to be actually used in the constructor of the base class, not of our derived class. And again, this self.caption, this is a similar thing, but this isn't happening in the constructor of the base class. This is happening in our constructor of our class. We're using a method that is setting the caption. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I kind of wanted to just step through a couple things that was happening here. So we know that we have this constructor here. Now let's see what it looks like in the documentation. So I'm in the link that would open up for the wiki, the normal Ruby reference is what I'm in here. So in Ruby reference, if I go down and click on window down here, if I scroll down a bit, I should get kind of an example, I think, right here. So this is what it's talking about here. And this looks, we're seeing the initializer, and now we have a width and a height. So what we're doing is we're sending in, when we use super, we're sending that information up. We're allowing it to be used in the constructor that window has, not the one that we're for our purposes. So it's a little bit confusing because it's done a little bit different ways, but it's being set that way. So this stuff all kind of looks a bit funny at first, but then when you kind of just look at it and you've seen it in other places, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. There's other instance methods here. Where are they? There's draw. So this is an instance method. We'll already have it in our class, and there'll be an update. It's down here, and we probably have a button down right here. We're going to be using these ones that I'm highlighting right now. You're going to see those later on. And these are instance methods that we will be overriding and putting our own information in. So the Gosu is going to be looking for these. It knows about these things. It already has a kind of an empty version of them, and we're going to be overriding them and putting our stuff into them in our version of our class so that our game happens. And we've seen this when we were doing Lua. If you've watched the Lua video and other things where it's already been defined for us, and then we're kind of almost like we're redefining it, but we're just overriding the defaults. Okay, so that's enough talk about all that. Let's just dive into doing something. So I'm gonna use this idea here of doing the class and creating the initializer and sending the super and the title and doing those. So let's just do those. So it's just class, yeah. That's what I got. So the very first thing we need to do is we need to require the Gosu package. And well, I'm just going to write it and then I'll tell you about it. I'm not in this file right here. There we go. So this require Gosu, the parentheses are optional. I find it just a little bit easier to read sometimes. So sometimes it looks a bit confusing because you're wondering, is this thing a method, a function? What is this? So the parentheses are optional for all function and methods calls, but I just put them in because I'm more of a beginner person and it helps me read, and it might help any other beginner person as well. So remember, these are actually optional. You could do this, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave them in. So requiring that, this tells Ruby that we are using a Gosu module. And I'm going to make some constants for myself up here. I'm going to give it a title. And these are just going to be global constants. We'll call it open and close. And I'll do a width and a height. Okay, so we have a width and a height and a title. And I just want to put those there so it's easy for me to always just grab those and change them. I don't have to look through the code no matter how big the code is or how it's organized. I can just, you don't have to do that. I'm just going to do that. So let's do our class. And I'm going to call it game because that's what we're making. That's the idea of this. And we do need to, this is a subclass of the base class. And the base class is the Gosu. It's a scope operator. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. So we have that. Now we need to define our, do I have, okay, hold on. Let me fix the set shift width 4. Now if I tab in, yeah, there we go. Okay. It was giving me the 2 space thing. So we're going to def, and this is going to be our initializer. And this is where we're going to send in, we're basically saying this is not for our initializer, it's for the upper initializer. That's why we're using the super word. And we could use super space, but I'm going to use the parentheses. And I'm just going to use these 2 global constants that I set up here. We got width and height. Now this one is a little bit tricky. I had a little bit of a time wrapping my head around why this is the way it is. So we're going to see this self caption equals, and again, title is just the global constant up here. Let me just add I'm just going to add an instance variable. So you kind of see the confusion in my mind when I came across this, what's happening. So let's say I had a name, right? Let's say I had this. So this was really bothering me. I didn't understand why I need self.caption to be title. It looks like I'm setting an instance function. Okay, so this is an instance variable. This is a variable of the class, and this looks like a function of the class. So it's self. But normally you don't need to do this. Normally you could do this if it was a function. But this becomes ambiguous. It becomes a little bit confusing even for Ruby, because this could actually be just a global variable. So Ruby, I think, gets confused. Is this a global variable we're doing, or are we calling a class method or a class instance method? So this self gets rid of that. So normally you can just call instance methods or functions or whatever you want to call them. You can the self is implicit. You don't need the self there. But this specific one is a setter. It's a caption equals method, and if you leave the self off and it just sees this, Ruby gets confused that that we are calling a function, or are we making a global variable? So you have to have the self. So I know that's very confusing, but if I were to, like I said, if I were to drop it off here, Ruby would say, okay, you're making a global variable and you're setting it to the string up here. So now I have title and I also have caption under it. Where self, this is a method, and this is a setter function. This is a setter function that's actually doing something. It's taking that string, but it's actually doing some actions to it. There's a predefined setter. So it needs to be, you need to explicitly say self on this one, or Ruby's going to get confused about it. And these two up here, like I said, they're being sent up to the base class. They're being used in the base class initializer. This one is on the instance, but it needs to be self. But normally when we're calling even instance methods or functions, however you want to say, normally we don't need to put this here. But because it's a setter, because it's being set by equals, Ruby gets confused about this, and it will just make it a global variable or something like that. So we do need to explicitly say self on this one. So I was quite confused. Kept trying to figure out why this is over and over again. And this is what the class instance variable looks like. But we don't need Bob. So yeah, we're going to end this initialize with end. And I'm just going to put some empty ones in here. There's the update. So we can define update, and we could just leave it. And define draw. And what these are overrides. So these are actually defined in the base class, in the Gosu Windows base class. So Gosu is looking for these, so saying, hey, if I see any code in update, I'm going to run that code. If I see any code, I'm going to automatically call this update and draw over and over again, 60 times a second. So we're going to be overriding those, but we can just leave them blank for now, just like a skeleton setup. Okay, so this should be able to open a window with a title that says open and close. And now we just made the class. We haven't actually made an instance of this class. So we can do, we don't actually, like we could make this class an instance and hold it in a variable and everything like that. But Ruby is a language that is very elegantly made. Like we don't need to go through all that. We can actually make an instance of the class and then make it run that instance without even storing it anywhere. We don't need to do that. So we normally would make an instance, we'd say game.new, but we don't need to store this anywhere and then do anything with it. We could say game.new and then .show. So I don't know if they have this. Oh yeah, they are doing it here in the tutorial as well. I wonder if they've done it the other way. Just looking through. I didn't actually follow this tutorial. Like I probably did very long time ago, but I was just browsing over it real quick before this video. No, they didn't. So they're doing it the nice and easy way for, and you can see here that they're not using parentheses. That's all that we need to do for this. We just need to say this class, let's just make it new and immediately use it. And we don't need to actually hold it in a variable or anything like that. We don't need to do any of that stuff. Ruby is very simple. We can just make the thing and use it on the fly. And so this is setting up our class, and then this is just us using it immediately. We don't even need to store it anywhere. And that's what we're doing here. So I'm going to save this and see how this works out for us. It's Ruby. Okay, now let's see the title. It says open and close up here. And I'm going to try to close it, and it closes. So that's pretty good. I think we can add one more thing to this. So this is obviously the constructor initializer for the class. This is something that has been predefined in window, but we are overriding it, and so is draw. And there's another one, well, there's several others, but there's another one that's kind of important to us, which is the keyboard input. It's button down. It's a method in window. Okay, so here we go, button down. If I hover over it, it says it's an instance method. That means it's something that is it's going to work on the instance of the class that we're using. So and we're getting this ID. This ID can be checked for the value of it to see what it is. So I believe right when we go to Gosu, yeah, all of these here, these are all the ID is going to be these. This keyboard down, keyboard end, and there's like an A to Z. We can check the value to all of those. So let's do that, and we'll use a case when case statement for Ruby to check the value. Because what I want to do is I want to be able to close it two different ways. I want to be able to close it normal closing it, and I also want to be able to press escape, and that'll allow us to define this or override this predefined button down method. So define, and it's called button down. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to check the value of this ID. And it might be many different values. So instead of using a bunch of if else statements, it's nice on these type of things to use whatever the language's version of a case statement is. And for Ruby, it's called case. So we'll go case ID. And we'll say when it's equal to the escape. So somewhere down here is keyboard escape. There it is. So this keyboard escape, that's what we're looking for. So we'll say when, and this is a that keyboard escape is in the scope of the Gosu package again. So we need this Gosu : keyboard escape, and this is all capital. This is like a constant. It's like the constants I made up here, except it's defined in the Gosu package. And there is a method also defined for window, or back into window, that should be just close. Check. There it is. Close instant method. This method is called whenever the user tries to close window. So we're gonna use that. And then we'll just end it. And I don't think that's capitalized. I'm going to change that in a second. Okay. And I could say self close, but again, we don't need to do that. But we do need for this funny version right here where we're assigning. When we're assigning to it, if it is a instance method, we're going to need to explicitly say self. If we're just calling it, we don't need to explicitly say self. And this should give us the ability to press escape and to close the window. And I'm going to press escape, and it closed. So that does work. And I'll just push another button, space, nothing happens, H, Q, now escape, and it closes. Okay, so I think that's as far as we're going to get in this video. The next video, we will change the background color. We will load a background, but I just wanted to kind of gloss over a little bit of Ruby, talk about the documentation a little bit, because it is good, but it is also a little bit, you know, you have to kind of learn how to read it, and just set up a basic skeleton project. So these things are not even, we're not even doing anything with them, but we will be later. Okay, so first thing is we need to require the Gosu, and this Gosu does need to be installed on your system through gem install Gosu. And I'm just making these for myself, so I could always just change them up here easily. I don't have to look through the code to where they're at, but they're just called global constants. And then we have our subclass that we've made from our base class, and we're initializing it. We're sending width and height up with super, and then we are using the caption method to set the title. Then down here we have this, these are all overrides. So these are all defined already for us, but now we're overriding them when we use them. Put this button down, taking the ID, and we're just using a case statement on it to check different equalities of this ID. For this one, it's just escape's the only thing we're looking for, and we're calling the instance method close. We have a update and draw that we're not doing anything with. And now to make the instance and to run it of this game class that we created up here, we're just using game new to make the instance of it. And we're not even storing the instance. We're just telling that new instance immediately to show itself. And that's all we actually need to run this program. Again, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed it, and goodbye.